Hey, how is everyone? This is Rebel Heart Rose. As soon as I. Oopsie. Uh, Sorry about that. I'm a coaster for my water. I love I'm drinking this bubbly. It's called bubbly. Uh, Brand of water and cherry aftertaste. I don't recommend getting it unless you want a bad aftertaste. The cherry is not that bad. It's the fact that it's caffeinated, or not caffeinated, but water soda. Should we start, or should we wait a little bit? I haven't done this. I haven't done a YouTube stream in a while since they took my last one down. This one they shouldn't take down. I'm reading from Xena. We're going to start on it. I'm thinking about. I know I'm doing 2 chapters, the first and second. The third chapter is going to be a whole new stream. Then we can talk about the book a little bit. Talk about what we read, what I read. Ready? Okay. The first chapter is called Immortal Desire. It was a dark and stormy night. No, she muttered, bent over the creased parchment scroll unrolled against a plank of wood, cradled in her lap. That's not it, and scored a thick black line of ink through the words. Her mind worked ferociously to invent a new opening line. Gabrielle. The day dawned like a lover's caress. She got as far as lovers with caress, still in her mind, not on parchment, before once again obliterating the line of rapidly scribed text. That's not it either. Gabrielle. The afternoon was too beautiful for words, probably because she couldn't find any words, not any that worked, not any that didn't just lie there on the page, evoking neither image nor emotion. There wasn't any resonance in the words, no singing rhythms, no compulsion to keep reading to find out what happened next. Gabrielle. Abrupt frustration sought release in a garbled, indistinct, yet eloquent exclamation, something between a howl and a roar, as she clutched her head in despair. Gabrielle! Startled by Xena's battlefield bellow, Gabrielle glanced across the coals of their breakfast fire. What? You've been muttering over that scroll ever since breakfast, Xena declared. It's a beautiful day, Gabrielle. We had a good dinner, a good night's sleep in a cozy little glade, an even better breakfast. And there's a lovely waterhole just down the slope, ideal for bathing, which I know, because I've used it already. Gabrielle blinked. She did have some dim recollection of Xena calling out to her that the water was perfect. Are you implying I need a bath? I might imply you should go soak your head, Xena enunciated. But no, I'm merely suggesting you stop fretting over whatever it is you're doing. You're ruining my day. You're mending gear, Gabrielle noted, marking the pile of leather in Xena's lap as well as a length of sinew clenched in her teeth. No wonder her words had been slightly distorted. How can I be ruining your day? I happen to like mending gear, Xena explained, when I have the time to do it in peace. When warlords aren't attacking, and villagers aren't dying, and gods aren't disrupting my life. None of which, for a change, is happening, and I'd like to enjoy it. She paused. If you don't mind. Sorry. Gabrielle heaved a huge sigh. I just can't get it to come out right. Xena pulled the sinew from her mouth and threaded the awl. Another poem? Gabrielle waved a declarative hand, absently noting ink flying from the reed pen in a globby dollop a goodly distance away. No, I've given that up. I'm no good at poetry. Joxer's better at poetry than I am. White teeth flashed briefly as Xena grinned. Then try writing a song. If he can, you can. You don't understand, Gabrielle said plaintively. I'm blocked. I can't find a good beginning. Xena hitched one shoulder upward in a negligent shrug. Why not start at the end? Gabriel stared at her. You can't start a story at the end. Why not? Because you have to learn what the story is about before you write the ending. Xena observed her with an infuriatingly bland expression. You can't make up the end first. It was exceedingly aggravating. It was exceedingly aggravating discussing this with someone who couldn't understand the craft. How am I supposed to know how it ends when I don't know how it starts? Gabriel demanded. It's rebelling, refusing to let me find how it wants to be told. How it wants to be told? All stories have opinions, Gabriel explained. You have to find one you can deal with, and then begin. Xena's eyebrows arched. You make it sound like it's an enemy. No, not an enemy. Gabriel frowned down at the scroll with its crossed out beginnings. A friend, but sometimes a difficult one. A stubborn one. Xena grinned. No basis in real life, then. Gabriel grunted, faint appreciation of the compliment, distracted by the black outlines on the scroll. What was the perfect opening? Xena went back to mending gear. So, you're saying you don't know how the story ends, begins, or what happens in it? Gabriel nodded gloomily. How do you expect to write a story if you don't know what happens? I never know what's going to happen, Gabriel explained with some asperity. Someone who wasn't a writer couldn't possibly understand. Part of the fun is discovering what comes next. She looked meaningfully at Xena's mending. Stories aren't like gear. It's never one stitch after another, each one identical. My stitches are never identical, Xena put in dryly, but a collection of unexpected happenings. Gabrielle ignored the interruption. You string them together, and eventually you see what the story is about. Well, if you don't know how the story starts or ends, or what's going to happen in between, why do you even bother? Because it's a challenge, Gabriel explained. It's an adventure. Uh-huh. Xena chewed thoughtfully at the owl, eyeing the scroll. You're always scribbling something. Where do you get your ideas, Gabriel? Joxer had asked that once before. She never knew how to answer it. How could anyone not know where ideas come from? They were always there in her mind, arguing over who deserved to see the light of day first. Of late, no one in her mind was arguing anything. Inspiration, Gabriel replied despondently. I seem to be lacking it lately. Well, what's inspired you before? You, she said promptly. Hercules, Autocles, Autolycus, some of the adventures we've had? She shrugged. I don't know, just things. Xena's smile was slow. Love? Gabriel, recalling the second attempt at an opening line with its reference to a lover's caress, felt the blush creep up from throat to forehead. Xena's knowing smile grew into a grin. Uh-huh. There's nothing wrong with writing about love, Gabriel muttered, especially when there's no appropriate male in your current life, your real life. Gabriel mouthed the twisting, couldn't express a resigned sigh. That's an understatement. Well then, write about that. Xena suggested. Write a story about your perfect man. Someone who could sweep you off your feet. The man of your dreams. Xena's expression was languorous, languorous, her tone slow and suggestive, freighted with feminine innuendo. The ultimate fantasy. The blush remained. I don't have one, Gabriel muttered. Xena snorted. You're the writer, she said. Make one up. The water was perfect. So was the glade, the sun, the day. Gabrielle set aside her scribbling long enough to partake of the water hole, washing strawberry blonde hair, scrubbing at skin left untended too long. She was too fair to tan the way Xena did, but she had gained enough permanent color so that she didn't burn too badly anymore, and calluses to boot. Her training with Xena and the Amazons had accounted for many of them. There was little about herself Gabrielle felt was truly feminine, the way men supposedly liked their women, but she had taken to the active life. She thrived on it now, even if it allowed no time or opportunity for a so-called normal life. Gabriel pushed off the shallow bottom of the water hole, floating on her back. She employed hands and arms as fins to keep her body moving. Slowly, she wore only a thin, gauzy tunic, chopped off at shoulders and thighs, too self-conscious to swim or bathe in the nude while out of doors. Odd, she thought, that she had no compunction about burying her midriff in everyday clothes. But when it came to getting in a lake or river, she wanted the illusion of more propriety. You never knew what a stranger might show up. You never knew when a stranger might show up. Just now, there were none. Only Xena, a short walk away, camped behind a screen of reeds and fern, still assiduously mending gear. Certainly, Xena would chase off any importunate strangers who hoped to catch a glimpse of a nearly naked Gabrielle. Not that it would precisely inflame their desires, she told the sky overhead, floating comfortably. Maybe Xena's right. Maybe I should make up the perfect man and write about him. Drifting there, she thought about it. Was there a perfect man? Could there ever be a perfect man? Handsome men, yes, she'd seen her share. Kind men, even. But the perfect man would have to combine all the elements Gabriel found most attractive and compelling, binding them together in a stunningly masculine, strong, handsome body, because, of course, she did have her preferences in how a man looked and moved, even though she never seen it put together just the way she'd like it. Well, maybe Her- Hercules comes pretty close, she murmured. Tall, strong, broad in the shoulders, narrow in the hips, in perfect proportion, tanned. Though actually, I think I like dark hair better. Hercules was a mountain lion, all sun-kissed skin and hair. But Gabriella had always found the Black Panther more compelling, more dangerous. Dangerous? She thought. Is that what I want? No, of course not. She wanted someone who was kind and gentle and unafraid to be tender. A man unafraid to speak of his innermost emotions. A man unafraid to cry. A man willing to communicate and to listen to her innermost thoughts and feelings. Gabriel's mind began to knit together the attributes and aspects she found most intriguing. Suddenly the picture presented itself, the image of the ideal man, her ideal man. She stood up abruptly, busily writing in her head, and splashed through the water to the bank, a cursory toweling with a rough length of old curtain dried her enough to stand the faint breeze against her skin. Then she knelt and gathered up the implements of her craft, left sitting beside her clothing, wood plank, parchment scroll, reed pen, and a small pot of crude ink. The sun set behind him was glorious, but he was even more so. Gabriel sighed, inspiration at last. Having scribed away half the day, foregoing all but a swig or two of watered wine and an apple, Gabriel stretched out languorously in soft green grass, drowsing on the bank beside the water. The nap was blissfully pleasant. with the gentle sun warming her skin through the now dried tunic. The faintest of breezes teasing her hair. She smelled coals, wood smoke, herbs and flowers, the scent of crushed grass, the barest tang of drying ink. Best of all, she couldn't smell herself anymore. Xena had been right about the bath. Gabriel stretched in casual abandon, eyes closed. She smiled, pleased with the day's work. All it had needed was the right inspiration. What is this crap? Gabriel sat up and spun around onto her knees with a stifled gasp of shock. A man! A man's voice! A man right there, standing over her, holding her scroll, reading her scroll. Suddenly she wasn't afraid anymore, only angry, and somewhat embarrassed. Gabriel sprang upright and attempted to snatch the scroll out of his hand. She failed. He tangled it over her head. She was not tall. He was. Short of attempting to leap into the air after the parchment, which would be exceedingly undignified, there was nothing she could do. A smirk and edged smile she found most annoying curved his mouth, outlined by a thin black beard. Gabriel summoned the tone of command she had heard Xena use. Give that back. The smile widened. And permit you to write more of this drivel? I think not. Ares, she growled. What are you doing here? His feigned innocence had never fooled her, passing by. You're a god, she said pointedly. You never pass by. You only come when there's a reason. When you have a reason, she amended. The gods knew she and Xena never had a reason to want his company. Ares arched eloquent with arched eloquent brows. He was tall, dark, handsome, if in a cruel way. He was unquestionably strong. He wore black leather. He moved like a panther. It's getting good. Gabrielle blushed. He waved the scroll at her. Is this what women want, Gabrielle? Is this what women really want in a man? He paused suggestively. Is this what you want? The blush deepened, but so did the anger. He muttered in mock solicitude. Have I offended you? Or have I merely uncovered your fantasy? He had an infuriating smile and employed it to good effect. Do you dream of me at night? Or are you dreaming of me just now? Gabrielle crossed her arms tightly, wishing she had her staff. It wouldn't do any good against Ares, but she wanted it anyway. She glared at him, and then realized she was wearing next to nothing. With a garbled blurt of dismay, Gabrielle snatched up the damp curtain towel spread on the nearest bush and swept it around her. It wasn't dry yet, clammy against her flesh, but it did cover much of her against his amused observations. Ares grinned, displaying white teeth. I can see through that, you know. Gabriel clutched the fabric more tightly, still glaring. A gentleman would never say that, she declared between her teeth. A gentleman would never look. He waved the scroll again. According to this, a gentleman is not what women want. According to this, women want that What bears what bears a striking resemblance to me. He spread both hands, striking a pose that threw all of his more masculine attributes into relief. She gritted her teeth. You are so arrogant. So is the man in here. He dangled the screw before her face, then abruptly tossed it aside. She followed its path with her eyes, wanting to snatch it up and guard it against him, but he had already read it, and now he'd make it a weapon against her, if she let him. Gabrielle straightened her shoulders, lifted her head, met his eyes squarely, not flinching from the man who wasn't a man at all but a god, and one who took so much pleasure in discomfiting people, as well as sending them off to kill one another. No, she said, you are not what women want. The man in there may bear a slight resemblance to your physical appearance, strictly superficial, I do assure you, but he's nothing like you. There's kindness in him, and tenderness, and honesty, and loyalty, devotion. You make him sound like a dog, Gabrielle. Do women want a dog? And gentleness? And a good sense of humor? He's willing to laugh at himself, to not take himself too seriously, to honor his mother. Hera insists on that, and to admit when he makes a fool of himself. Sorry, no can do. And he likes dogs and cats and children and flowers in the meadow, clouds in the sky. But can he juggle? She ignored his interruptions up till then. That stopped her. Juggle? He waggled dark eyebrows. I never take myself too seriously, Gabrielle. But then, I don't take anyone too seriously. Certainly not mortals. How could I? You exist for our amusement. She realized that she didn't need her staff. She didn't need a dagger or a sword. She didn't need any kind of weapon when she had her tongue and a certain knowledge. Gabriel smiled at the god of war, then presented her challenge and victory in one unerring blow. Xena doesn't want you, Ares. Oh, indeed, that worked. Well enough that he was momentarily struck speechless. Something she never witnessed before, and attempted to cover it by disappearing in a shower of sparks. Gabriel grinned deliciously. Gotcha. She bent to pick up the discarded scroll, brushing it free of debris. She unrolled it, reading swiftly. Now, where was I? Ooh, this is getting good. I gotta overbite. Okay. Xena woke up just after dawn. She lay there a moment beneath the blankets, savoring the warmth. Automatically, her senses stretched out to make note of Gabrielle, still sound asleep from the sound of it. Gabrielle had come back from the waterhole, grinning gleefully to herself, obviously pleased with what she'd accomplished. Xena had asked her how the writing went, but Gabrielle had waved her off, saying something about telling her a story later. But after eating a quick dinner, she lost herself in the scroll again, muttering about getting it down before the light died, and Xena never did find out what the story was. She supposed it didn't matter, Something had sparked Gabrielle's imagination again, which was far preferable to listening to muffled exclamations of dismay and frustration. She sat up, finger combed her hair out of her face, then peeled back the blankets. Her bladder desired relief. Then she'd start breakfast. They needed to get back on the road. Xena rose, thinking about a bush, and paused. This orientation swept in, seizing her without warning. For a moment, she was in darkness, and then abruptly she was elsewhere. The small encampment was gone. Gabriel was gone. The morning was gone. She stood in a meadow at midday, blinking in sudden sunshine. What? She began and then fell silent. The meadow spread out before her, sweeping across rolling hills, displaying a vivid carpet of every wild flower known to man. Odds are, I'm enjoying this way too much. Do you like it? He asked. I did it for you. She swung around, hand clasping for a weapon, but none existed. That too had changed. Ares? Do you like it, Xena? He bent, plucked a crimson flower, held it out to her. Isn't it lovely? I'm sorry. I'm really loving this. She stared at him. The expression was not one she recognized. She wasn't sure his face did either. It seemed uncomfortable with the new arrangement of his features. Or would you prefer a blue one? The flower in his hand was no longer crimson. He seemed nonplussed when she didn't answer. Abruptly, the flower disappeared entirely. An instant later, he was pressing something small, warm, and furry into her hands. Here, you like kittens, don't you? She cradled it absently, noting its purr as it nestled against her breast. Aries. Or I can get you a puppy. Would you rather have a puppy? Aries. Look at the clouds, he said, gesturing skyward. Aren't they lovely? Lovely was not a word she'd ever expected to hear from his lips. Not in describing clouds. She gave them the most cursory of glances, then fixed her eyes on him again. Are you ill? She asked, or is this some kind of a joke? His brows drew together. You wound me, he murmured, moving closer. I created all this for you, and you insult me. He was very close now, and insufferably large. Xena stood her ground. I think you've hurt my feelings, he told her. You don't have any, Aries. See, you have hurt my feelings. Broad shoulders drooped, lips turned down. He was the picture of absolute dejection. Can we talk about this, Xena? What's wrong with you? She blurted. Nothing that a smile from your lips could not cure, he told her earnestly. Xena blinked. I must still be asleep. This has to be a dream. No, he said, shifting closer yet. This is real, Xena. Every bit of it. The meadow, flowers, clouds, the kitten. She could smell him. It was a clean masculine scent, with the faintest undertone of something she couldn't name. He was a god, after all. Could she expect him to smell like a man? And what was he doing standing so close, so intimately? And then the kitten was gone, though she couldn't say when it had disappeared, and her hands were clasped in his. Xena, he murmured, pulling her down to the grass. Look at the flowers, the clouds. She jerked free and stood up. I don't want to look at the flowers, she said. I don't want to look at the clouds. I want to know what you're doing here and what you want. His face reflected hurt. I'm here to spend more time with you, Xena, to see if we can't make a new beginning. She stared down at him, even seated at the ground. He was a large man, a large leather-clad man, with black hair that somewhat disconcertingly curled against his neck, a thick and corded neck, perfectly balanced by extremely broad shoulders. Xena probably pinched herself on the arm hard enough to elicit a brief hiss of pain. The meadow remained. So did the flowers and the clouds. The kitten was still absent. Ares was abruptly standing next to her again, reaching for her arm. Let me kiss away the pain. Xena took one long step backward. Are you mad? She demanded. Did some idiot steal your body when you weren't looking? This isn't you. His face was set in lines that on another man might be called kindness. It's who I am now, he told her warmly. For you. For me? For me? She stared at him wildly. This is some kind of joke. Well, I won't fall for it. Aries. Underneath that pasted on facade of tenderness is a monster who isn't happy unless men are dying for him, invoking his name in pointless battles. This charade you're undertaking now won't get you anything, Ares. I know you too well. He merely continued to smile. Am I tender then? He asked. I was so hoping you noticed. Flowers, she said, imbuing the word with abject disbelief. Clouds? A kitten? Is this a new kind of campaign, Aries? He reached out for her again, recapturing her hands. Xena, let me be gentle. Let me be tender. Let me be kind. You know the other part of me, the tall, strong, handsome warrior god of undeniable sex appeal, who can protect you against all harm. Now let me listen to you, Xena. Let me know what's in your heart. Let me share what's in my heart. Undeniable sex appeal. She echoed. There's much more to me than that, Xena. I've just been unable to let you see it. I've been too shy to let you see it. Shy? But now I see I should. Now I see I must. His head was bent over her, lips hovering. Let me show you who I really am, Xena. Gabrielle! She shouted. Gabrielle started awake. That battlefield bellow again. She scowled sleepily up at Xena. She stood over her. What? Time to get up, Xena said, turning away to the fire. You must have been sleeping like the dead. I called your name 4 times. Gabrielle levered herself up on one elbow, peeling the hair out of her face. I was dreaming. I know you were talking in your sleep. It was the strangest dream, Xena. I know that too. You muttered something about clouds and flowers and kittens. Gabriel sat up right now, wide awake. I did? Then something else about tall, strong, handsome, with undeniable sex appeal. Xena tossed her a grin across her shoulder. Guess writing about your perfect man gave you something good to dream about. Perfect man? Gabriel echoed. Then, oh, eek! Eek! Xena tossed her the water skin. That's all you had to say after dreaming about a man of your fantasies? Gabriel let the water skin flop next to her as she dropped back down to her bedding, sealing her eyes shut with her hands. He wasn't, she muttered. Not the man of my fantasies, or yours either. Well, shake it off, Xena advised. I want to get going. The dregs of the dream were starting to slip away, which was precisely what Gabrielle preferred. Nodding absently, she climbed out of her blankets and staggered off into the brush, looking for a suitable tree or bush. Afterward, she went down to the water's edge to wash her face, trying to clear her muzzy head of the incongruous gross images her too fertile imagination had conjured up. Gabrielle, she leaped to her feet and spun around, vowing to never again go anywhere without her staff. Black leather and a blacker expression loomed over her, scowling fiercely. You lied, he hissed. None of it worked. And then the grassy verge was gone from beneath her feet, and she was in the water, rump planted in the sandy bottom, legs splayed out. After a shocked moment, she spat water from her mouth and slicked hair back from a face that felt numb. Gabrielle? It was Xena this time, observing her with missed brows. I thought you took a bath yesterday. Gabriel blinked at her. Is he gone? Is who gone? Gabriel opened her mouth to answer, then clamped it shut. She didn't dare speak his name. Rosina would know that somehow, unbelievably, inconceivably, she had managed to invoke Ares while writing about her perfect man. That she had managed to dream he was Xena's perfect man, Xena's ultimate fantasy. No, it would not do to tell her that. Her face was burning. Never mind, Gabriel muttered and climbed out of the water. Okay, that was the first chapter. I enjoyed that immensely. Oh. Hmm. I think we can get through chapter 2. So maybe I'll just cut to chapter 1 and just do an hour stream per chapter. Maybe. Nah, I'll do a second one. That was funny. Oh, imagine. Just only imagine. Excuse me while I check. 2 against Thebes. I enjoyed that first chapter so much. It was so funny. Aries. always enjoyed Ares and Xena going back and forth. Always enjoyed it. And somehow I partially had Gabrielle's imagination of what a perfect man would be. Uh, Especially one that didn't take himself too seriously, but was kind, good hearted. He loves kitties. Yeah. Oh, kitty and Xena. Oh my gosh. Oh, God, give me a kitten. No. Even though I already got 8 kittens here, that's like, oh, you got me. You nailed me right there. Seriously. Two against Thebes. Robin Wayne Bailey. Xena woke suddenly and flung aside her coverlet. On the ground beside her thin pallet, she found her sword and unsheathed it as she sprang up. Fully alert, listening, she turned, searching the darkness. Moments passed. The stark silhouette of Mount Parnassus loomed in the south, a black pillar upon which revolved the pale stars of night. To the east, just beside Parnassus, the smaller Mount Helicon, Helicon stood, its peak illumined with just a hint of the frosty moon that hid behind it. The embers of a waning campfire cast a dull red shimmer on her naked blade. As she lowered it, she moved a step closer to the dwindling warmth and exhaled a breath of feathery softness. An unseasonable chill had fallen over the Boeotian plain while she had slept. What sound had awakened her? She frowned when she failed to spy any threat. The night breeze teased through wisps of her dark hair. With a quiet sigh, she brushed them back from her face and tried to relax. Perhaps there had been no sound at all, only an outcry from her dream. Yet another dream of battle and slaughter. Her dreams were torment tonight. Visions from her past, red as the embers whose edges she nudged from a booted toe. But for the wind and the slow movement of the heavens, all was still. She stared across the darkened landscape. Boeotia, it seemed to whisper to her tonight, to speak in muted tones of its history and its tragedy. Boeotia, where more wars have been fought than anywhere else on Greek soil. Greek against Persian, Athenian against Spartan, Boeotia, where men by the thousands had died. Was that truly the wind at her ear? Or did she hear the laughter of Ares and of Hades as they counted the men who had fallen here? Or was it all just the imagination of an insomniac woman? She had nearly convinced herself it was so. With another soft sigh, she sheathed her sword and prepared to lay back down. Then the sound she thought she had heard came again. A moan on the other side of the campfire, as if in a dream of her own. Gabrielle shifted under the gray folds of her blanket. Xena watched her friend with inexplicable unease. What nightmare, she wondered, could trouble that innocent heart? For a long, watchful moment, Xena stood above her friend. Gabrielle lay stay again, with the blanket drawn almost over her head. Slender fingers that might have clutched a doll or a feather pillow with a similar intimacy, instead lightly clutched a stout staff that brought a weak smile to Zena's lips. But she wondered again, as she had so many times, if she had made the right decision in letting the younger woman travel with her. After a while, Xena turned away and crouched down to warm her hands above the coals. At least Gabrielle was getting some sleep, however troubled. Xena doubted she herself would close her eyes again. Something about the night, some dreadful quality, gnawed her nerves. Despite the embers' warmth, she bit her lip and shivered. Another moan. Gabrielle turned over onto her back, with face still half hidden beneath her cover. She screamed. Xena shot upright. Gabriel continued to sleep. An icy sensation tingled along Xena's spine. How could anyone sleep through such an outcry? She stared in anticipation of some waking sign. None came. Gabrielle lay still again, as if frozen, as if. Zena's heart quickened. She moved around the campfire, bent, and shook her friend. There was an edge in her voice. Gabrielle? The blanket slipped down from Gabrielle's face. Xena gasped. The blonde hair was the same, but the face was not her friend's. The lips were thin, not full, and red as berries even in the dark of night. The cheeks were gaunt, almost hollow, beneath a narrow brow. The skin held an, an unnatural, sallow glow. It was a face Xena knew. Antigone. Eyes as bright and large as emeralds opened as if in answer to that hushed name. The woman on Gabrielle's pallet made no other move, but turned her head to fix Xena with her gaze. A nearly forgotten yet too remembered voice issued from a lean mouth. That which was given is neither mine nor yours. What becomes a throat, a bloody hand defiled, because the one dark sea, by sacred shores, a crown that is no crown, crown's king reviled. Emerald eyes closed again. Xena flung herself forward and snatched the blanket aside to reveal not Gabrielle's form, but that of a young woman richly draped in white funeral raiment. Gabrielle! She called in confusion. Then Antigone! The the wind rushed across the embers, a swirl of smoke, and ash rose up. It spiraled around Xena's face, stinging and blinding her. She whipped ferociously at her eyes. No, she wiped ferociously at her eyes. Xena, what's wrong? What is it? Worried hands clutched Xena's shoulders. Gabrielle's pale eyes, so blue in the sunlight, filled with alarm as she bolted up from her palate. Xena, were you having another nightmare? Then she spied her blanket still clutched in Xena's hand. Alarm gave way to a look of puzzlement, then smugness. She glanced at the fading embers and grabbed her blanket back. Oh, I get it. Your blanket wasn't enough, so you tried to take mine. So, oh, she flung the rough spun cloth around her shoulders and clutched it tightly with both fists as she lay down again, and indignantly turned her back to Xena and the campfire. Well, I'm too alert for you. I don't sleep as heavily as I used to. Zena's eyes narrowed. She stared sharply at Gabrielle, rubbed her eyes with her knuckles, then stared again. She hadn't dreamed the previous few moments, and she hadn't imagined them. She had seen Antigone, or rather, she had seen Antigone's ghost, for Antigone was quite long dead, and she rose to her feet. Get up, she ordered, reaching for her armor. We're leaving. Gabriel rolled over and raised up on one elbow. Leaving? She protested. Xena, it's the middle of the night. Where are we going? Delphi, Xena answered as she fastened straps and buckled on her sword. Gabriel glared stubbornly at Xena for a moment. Finally, with a sigh of long-suffering exasperation, she shook her head and began rolling up her bedding. Xena did the same, and in the deep night they set off at an urgent pace for the black shadow of Parnassus. For the first few miles, Xena ignored Gabriel's persistent questions and kept her silence. It was easy to do. Gabriel's was only one voice in her ears as she walked. The ghost of old friends and acquaintances walked with her now. She heard them, saw them vaguely, in the shadows of boulders or gleams of starlight. Her mind raced with questions of her own as she sifted through grim memories. Finally, however, she relented. You knew Antigone? Gabriel said, awe colored her young face. After the death of her father, King Oedipus, Xena answered, her two brothers warred against each other for the throne of the city of Thebes. Antigone's younger brother, Eteocles seized power, while Polynices, the older brother and legitimate heir, was away. Xena paused in her story, wiping her hair back from her face with one hand, slowing her pace only slightly to allow Gabriel to catch her breath. It was a wild time. She continued. Polynices put together an army of 7 warlords to attack Thebes. Eteocles held a strong position behind the city's walls. Still, he feared his brother's might. Gabriel ventured a guess. Eteocles asked you to help defend Thebes? Xena nodded. Polynices had already asked me to join his army, and his was the more virtuous cause. Not that I had much truck with virtue in those days, she added in a self-deprecating manner. But a few months earlier I had met Antigone and her sister Ismene in Colonus near Athens. Their dedication to their father greatly impressed me. Gabriel interrupted again. Oedipus was with them. In the brightening moonlight, Xena's face turned grim and angry. He had blinded himself for what he perceived as his sins, killing his father, marrying his mother, and fled Thebes with his daughters as his guides. But in truth, Gabriel, the fault had never been his. Like all the children of Cadmus's line, Oedipus was a plaything for the gods. I have heard of a great play written by Sophocles, Gabriel said. I hope to see it some day when we visit Athens. Xena grew quiet again. She looked from side to side as she walked, still hearing the timeless echoes of battle on the winds that blew over the Boeotian plain. But she resisted the urge to stop and turn her gaze toward the northeast. There lay the haunted ruins of the city of Thebes. Gabriel adjusted the pack on her shoulder as she kept pace with Xena. But you say you saw Antigone's ghost tonight, and that she brought you some kind of message. A riddle, Xena answered. She hadn't told Gabriel how Antigone had seemed to appropriate Gabriel's form, nor how that had disturbed her. The house of Cadmus always had a thing for riddles. Gabriel hummed thoughtfully. That which was given is neither mine nor yours, she repeated. No need to recite the entire verse, Xena told her. The solution is easy. Gabriel looked dubiously at her companion. The answer is the necklace of Harmonia. Gabriel stopped in her tracks and leaned on her staff. You've seen it? She exclaimed. Xena, the necklace of Harmonia is almost legendary. Aphrodite gave it to Cadmus's wife, Harmonia, on the occasion of their wedding. It's fabulously beautiful, I've heard. She scrambled to catch up for Xena hadn't stopped. It's more than just a pretty piece of jewelry, Xena said. It's the true crown of Thebes. By tradition, only the man whose wife wears the necklace can call himself King of Thebes. Gabriel scratched her head. Then how could Aeticles seize the throne from Polonius? A smirk turned up the corners of Xena's mouth. Sometimes tradition yields to force of arms. If Polonius hadn't been caught off guard away from the city when his father died, he would have chosen a bride and given her the necklace his mother had once worn, and the throne would have been his. What if Ichicles had married and given his wife the necklace? Gabriel asked. Then, no matter his birth order, the citizens of Thebes would have recognized him as king, Xena said. Unfortunately for Eteocles, he thought his brother was his only enemy. With his ambition and cruelty, he had incurred Antigone's wrath, and before he could lay his hands on the necklace, she stole it. That which was given is neither mine nor yours, Gabriel murmured. Her eyes suddenly brightened. She gave it to you. She hesitated, stared at Mount Parnassus, which loomed ever larger before them. And you took it to Delphi. She beamed proudly at having solved the riddle. Then a look of puzzlement overcame her pride. But I still don't get the last line. A crown that is no crown crown's king reviled. Xena increased the pace without replying. She wasn't certain she understood it either, but the possibilities filled her with a rare dread. Halfway up the slopes of Parnassus, 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 Gabriel gasped. Xena allowed a small grin. She turned back toward her friend. Tired? She asked. But it wasn't fatigue that caused Gabriel to stop. Night had yielded to dawn, and the fire of new day's sun shimmered on the blue waters of the Gulf of Corinth, which lay visible between a gap in the misty foothills. Gabrielle leaned on her staff as she stared with awe-widened eyes. eyes. Besides the wine dark sea, she murmured. By sacred shore, Xena, it's beautiful. Xena nodded as she lay a hand on Gabriel's tanned shoulder. For a brief moment her worries melted as she regarded the splendid panorama, and she felt a rare stirring of pride in her great homeland. But when she glanced at Gabrielle, the sun dazzled her eye, and it was Antigone she saw. Xena? Xena blinked. I said, how much further is it? Xena passed a hand over her face. Despite the rising sun, her mood darkened again. Not far, she answered. The road to Delphi was well traveled, for many pilgrims and petitioners had made their way to Apollo's legendary oracle. Xena and Gabriel followed in their footsteps, up and around the graceful slopes to a small plateau nestled halfway up Parnassus. White stone buildings rose on either side of the road. Gabriel walked side by side with Xena now, her gaze darting left and right, an expression of wonder on her face. They passed a stadium, an amphitheater, a spring, a public bath. Near the bath, a man gestured to them from a makeshift booth as he arranged his wares on a table. Xena studied him dubiously. You're up early, he called. But never too early, I say. Get your souvenirs right here. Your official Delphi souvenirs. He held up a garment. Displayed upon it were neat letters that read, My parents visited the Delphi Oracle, and all I got was this lousy chitin. Chitin. Was it? It's Chiton. It's either chitin or shitten. So, Xena brushed the garment aside. Where is everybody? She said, indicating the empty streets. Gabriel fingered a string of beads, then a red glazed calyx upon which was written, I love Apollo. She made a face as she set it back. The merchant frowned, then shrugged. It's the off season, he said. Besides, some idiot warlord attacked us about this time yesterday morning, right at dawn. You know, the tourists ran like it was a marathon all over again, and most of the locals are still hiding in the hills. He picked up a doll that was dressed in a tiny gray robe with a lightning bolt clutched in its miniature fist. He thrust it hopefully at Gabriel. What? You don't love Apollo? Maybe you love Zeus. I got all the gods here. He waved a hand over his display. He turned his attention back to Xena. But like who's got time to hide? I got a son at Plato's Academy, and a daughter off at Sappho's finishing school, and I got a business to run. Xena leaned across the table. What warlord? She asked. The merchant looked irritated. How should I know? What warlord? They all look alike to me, all that armor and leather and crap. He ran his gaze up and down Xena. No offense, I mean, who attacks Delphi? It's like just inviting some god's immortal boot up your backside. He shot a look toward Gabrielle. Hey, you gonna buy something? Xena touched Gabrielle's arm, and they moved on. The street ended at the Temple of Apollo. It was the oldest of the 38 buildings that made up Delphi. Its gleaming columns rose against the dramatic backdrop of Parnassus itself, and it faced the sea below like a watchful eye. With a certain reverence, Xena hesitated, then led the way up a cascade of marble stairs to a pair of great doors. The interior was darker than Xena remembered. In the center of the ceiling there hung a strange ball of faceted, reflective glass. Xena had never seen its like before. It spun slowly, catching the firelight from the dozen braziers standing about the vast chamber and casting it back with swirling dizziness effect. For the first time, she noticed the music and drums that beat an intoxicating rhythm. The air smelled with a potent and unfamiliar incense. Her head felt as if it were swelling, and her face flushed with an inexplicable warmth. Her pupils seemed to dilate, making the weirdest lighting still more weird. Gabrielle touched her hand. Without thinking, Xena drew her into a dancer's embrace, then propelled a smaller, unresisting woman through a series of spins and turns that ended with Gabrielle bent backward in a sweeping dip. From the far end of the chamber came enthusiastic applause. Her lips dangerously close to Gabrielle's. Xena seemed to wake from a spell. The music ended. The rush of heat faded from her skin. She dropped a breathless Gabrielle like a stone and straightened. I've come about the necklace of Harmonia, said a voice out of the darkness. Xena frowned and cocked her head. I can't see you. A patient chuckle. My predecessor was killed yesterday, the voice said. I'm her replacement. I've made a few changes. I know she was very open and public, but I think an oracle should surround herself with a little bit of mystery, don't you, Xena? Gabrielle picked up her staff and took her usual place at Xena's side. She seems to know you, she whispered. Who are you? Xena called. A shaft of dim light penetrated the darkness. Within it, a black-haired woman, Gabriel's age, sat revealed on a throne-like chair. Beneath the chair, a narrow fissure breathed forth a thin, whitish vapor. The young woman rose to her sandaled feet. I'm Disco, she answered, the Delphic oracle. She raised her hands, gesturing to either side. The light brightened and the darkness drew back as if a curtain had parted. And these are my psychic friends, a quartet of middle-class crones all dressed in black, smiled vacuously and wiggled gnarly fingers at Xena and Gabriel. I need to know about the warlord who attacked you yesterday, Xena interrupted. Did he take Harmonia's necklace? Do you know what he plans to do with it? Disco put on a pouty face. Well, of course. What's the point of being an oracle if I don't know all the answers? I have Apollo's ear, you know. Maybe you'd better give it back before he misses it, Gabriel muttered. The oracle braced her hands stubbornly on her hips. Mellow out, little sister. It's only out of the kindness of my heart, and I'm refraining from revealing your future. She folded her arms over her breast and gave an exaggerated shudder. One of the crones leaned forward and crackled. Want to know if your boyfriend's cheating on you? She said to Xena. An- Another leaned forward. Want to know if you'll be rich or get a better job? Inquired the third. Or, of course he took the necklace, said the fourth with a gesture of disdain. What else do you think he came for? We don't do prostate exams. Gabriel shot a quizzical look at Xena. Xena moved past Disco and stood before the fourth crone. Old mother, she said respectfully, I don't understand all these changes, but I can tell that you appreciate the traditional ways. Can you tell me what I need to know? Hey, I'm the oracle here, Disco snapped. And Xena is the future of Hellas, the fourth crone shouted back. While Disco's time is shorter than it takes to tell us, your act's so a load of crap. There's a sound at your door. Wake up to the rap. Xena turned her back and headed for the door. Excuse me for striking a sour note, she said. I don't have time for your squabbling. Disco made a rude hand gesture to the sour-faced old crone, then called Xena. Wait, Xena, don't leave your cake out in the rain. I may dance to a different drum, but I know your song. Xena halted, then turned around with a set face, her expression humorless. Disco struck an audacious pose, then seated herself ceremoniously upon her throne. She closed her eyes, lifted her head. After a few moments, a low, melodic hum escaped her lips. Words formed a soft chant. Oh, she moaned. Love to love you, baby. Oh, love to love you, baby. That same rhythmic pounding they had heard earlier rose again. A puff of white smoke hissed upward from the fissure under Disco's chair. A second followed it. Gabrielle began to sway again. A tendril of vapor passed under her nose. What a rush, she whispered, entranced. Xena too felt the effect of the smoke, the flushing of her skin, the sudden warmth. She resisted a powerful urge to seize Gabrielle for another spin around the room. On the dais before her, the four black-robed crones, even the recalcitrant old mother, rose and moved together in a peculiar kind of line dance. Oh yeah, Disco cried, her voice rising to a crescendo. I feel it! I feel the power! The smoke flowed from the curious crack, swirled around her. Disco abandoned her chair and began to spin in a slow pirouette, around and around, round and round, her arms outflung, black hair making streamers about her face as she dipped and turned in dreamlike grace, like a puppet on Apollo strings. Xena thought with sudden reverence for though Disco's unsettling style, she had rapidly spied a re- revelatory beauty. Or maybe, though she fought it, the smoke was affecting her judgment. To the east, your song must take you, Disco intoned, her words building a cadence with the unseen drums, to Cadmus's city on the plain, where friendship will be tested and ghosts wait to be slain. Xena struggled to keep her eyes open. She felt the insistent throb of the music, and though her feet remained rooted, she swayed to its time. Gabriel danced around her with lithe movements that mirrored those of the oracle, yet with each whirling turn, her face seemed to change, become an Antagon. Then Gabriel, Antagon, and Gabriel. Disco sang on. A warrior princess must fight for Greece when dragons' teeth are strewn, or Creon will be king when Parnassus spears the moon. The music's beat intensified. The fissures seemed to open wider in the floor, spilling even more smoke into the air. The oracle faded in its pale embrace. Then the crones. Soon the smoke became so thick they could not be seen at all. As mysteriously as it began, the music also faded. Gabrielle collapsed to the floor, barely able to stand. Xena flung herself down beside her friend. The smoke seemed to rise above their heads in slow swirling eddies and waft away. When it cleared, Xena and Gabriel found themselves alone. Gabriel looked up and blew a strand of hair from her face. Sometimes I wonder, she said, if it's too late to go home, settle down with a couple of my father's cows, and spend the rest of my days quietly as an ordinary milkmaid. Xena got up from the floor and brushed herself off. You missed the action, came her dry comment. Gabriel sat up and hugged her knees. Xena, how are we going to get to Thebes? Think of it as part of your conditioning, Xena answered as she headed for the door. We still got most of the day. Conditioning? Gabriel shouted in exasperation. Most of the day? We're going to run? All the way to Thebes? Xena paused at the top of the stairs. The streets of Delphi were finally beginning to fill with people. A carnival atmosphere was developing with more merchants and souvenir hawkers setting up tent shops or wandering among the increasing strong. A stilt walker moved toward her with a sign around his neck that read, Eat So Velaki at Tassos, a midget juggler, weaved in and out of the stilt walker's legs. A trio of belly dancers worked the crowd at one corner, collecting direct drachmae in their tambourines. Can we at least grab one honeyed date or baklava? Gabriel begged. We've walked most of the night. We didn't have breakfast and I'm starving. Xena shook her head. Last one to Thebes grooms Argo for months. She took off she took off down the stairs of Apollo's temple and through the streets. An annoyed Gabrielle called after Xena's back. Yeah, like I'm going to win that one. If you'd brought Argo along instead of turning him loose to go studying around the countryside, we could have ridden to Thebes. Then, with a sigh of resignation, she chased after the warrior princess. Late that night, far eastward and back on the Boeotian plain, Xena stood quietly and watched the moon sliding down the side of the black splinter that marked distant Parnassus. Her thoughts wandered back again to that war between brothers and the fall of Thebes. She had sat on the sidelines then, refusing to choose sides. Had she done the right thing? Antigone, her friend, tried to mediate a peace, but in the end, Polyneices lay dead on the field outside the city, unmourned and unburied. By Eteocles' order, enraged as enraged Antigone defied that order and buried her older brother. In turn, an enraged Eteocles commanded that Antigone be entombed alive. Then Xena might have taken action to save Antigone, but Antigone forbade it. To shame Eteocles and her uncle Creon, who supported him, she staged her own funeral, dressed herself in the finest raiments, and had herself carried through the city's weeping throngs to the place of her interment, and to spit in Eteocles' eye. She stole the necklace that would have made him king and gave it to Xena to spirit away. What happened to Eteocles? Gabriel asked. She sat beside a campfire, roasting the rabbit she had earlier clubbed with her staff, and baking a fish Xena had caught from the lake beside which they were camped. With her hair tied back, the red sheen from the fire played eerily over her young face. Xena turned and crouched down beside Gabriel. 3 days after Antigone's burial, his guards found him torn to pieces in his bedchamber. Some said it was the work of the Furies, punishing him for mistreating his family. Others said Apollo himself had done the deed. Gabriel poked at the rabbit with a dagger Xena had loaned her, and juicy grease fell sizzling into the flames. And Creon? She asked. Xena hesitated a long time before responding. He vanished, she said lowly, and that was the end of Thebes. Its citizens packed up and abandoned their homes. The city was haunted. Some claimed invaders moved in, but none stayed. Then an earthquake toppled the walls, the great buildings, even the temples. Gabriel took the fish from the hot stones upon which it cooked and blew it on the smoking flesh to cool it. She filleted it then, and divided the pieces into clean stones she had washed in the lake. She handed one to Xena. Xena, she said, before taking the first bite of her own share. Why would Creon risk so much to steal Harmonia's necklace? If Thebes is in ruins, why would he want to be its king? Xena gazed off into the darkness. She had been pondering that same question all day. Don't scorch the rabbit, she warned. They ate the rest of their meal in silence. When only when only bones remained, and when fingers had been licked clean, Gabrielle unrolled her bedding, yawned, and prepared to sleep. Xena watched her with a quiet pride. You've done well today, Gabrielle. I set a grueling pace, and you stayed right by my side, and you conked that bunny as neatly as anyone could have. Gabrielle didn't hear. She was already asleep. With a sigh, Xena unrolled her own blanket. Before she lay down, however, some sense alerted her. Goose flesh rose on her arms. A chill shivered down her spine. She shot to her feet, and a hand went to the chakram at her hip as she whirled about. A pathetic figure, pale and thin, as smoke stood over Gabrielle. A dirty bandage covered eyes that leaked a horrid redness. Blood and filth matted his dark beard. The mighty Thude, thou mighty Thude, he leaned upon a staff like a bent old man. Xena could see right through him to Parnassus and the rising moon. She breathed his name, Oedipus. Once the king of Thebes, and Antigone's father, he held out a hand in warning in a voice that was stern, yet dry as death. He said, Friend of my daughter, beware. Oedipus spoke no more, but faded away. Xena stared at the place where he had stood, half disbelieving the vision. Then she felt a vibration in the earth, though through the soles of her boots, heard the sound of swiftly approaching horses. Gabrielle, get up! Xena drew her sword with one hand, and with the other hand scooped a burned brand from the fire. A weary-eyed Gabrielle stirred, then noting Xena's attitude and hearing the hoof beats, she seized her staff and sprang up. She 6 riders charged them. Xena and Gabrielle struck together, and 2 armored warriors went down hard. With a high-pitched battle cry, the warrior princess leaped into the air, flipped, and landed on the back of a 3rd rider. With her sword's pommel, she knocked him off and steered his horse into the path of another attacker. Leaping free an instant before the two beasts collided, Gabriel's staff crashed into the horse-haired helm of yet another attacker. Without hesitating, she spun low and expertly swept his feet from under him. Then an unexpected seventh rider rushed from the darkness. Xena cried a warning. Too late, Gabrielle turned and raised her staff. Her eyes widened at the sight of the horse. She tried to dodge. A great black shoulder brushed her, knocking her nearly into the lake. The seventh rider drew back sharply on the reins. The horse reared and let out a terrible whinny uh, as its hooves thundered against the ground, and it stood still, radiating cold hatred. The rider faced Xena. A leather-gloved hand rose and cast aside a concealed helmet. A cascade of blonde curls spilled out. Xena lifted the firebrand higher, the better to see the face, rider's face. Ismene! The name hissed through Xena's teeth. Ismene! The armored women glared, showing no fear at all, though she bore no obvious weapons. Leave this land, Xena. Your business here ended years ago when you let my sister die. Xena bristled. Antigone chose her path, she answered, the same as you chose yours when you ran away in the middle of the conflict. Ismene spoke with icy intensity. I'm older now. I no longer run from a fight. Xena cocked her head. Well, it looks like you've got one if you've sided with Creon. He killed an oracle of Apollo to seize Harmonia's necklace. I don't know what he's up to, but I intend to find out. Ismene spat scornfully. What did you ever care about Apollo or any of the gods? I warn you, Xena, leave or die. Ismene jerked on the reins and rode off into the night. Her 6 men scrambled after her, some on horseback, the rest on foot. The sounds of their groaning and stumble-footed retreat could be heard for minutes. A dazed Gabrielle sat up on the shore of the lake, one hand still in the water, her hair and face black with mud. Don't tell me, she grumbled when Xena knelt down before her. Sisters? Antigone and Ismene? Xena's mouth drew into a grim line as she stared off the way Ismene had gone. This has turned into a real family affair. Gabrielle gave a caustic look as she squeezed mud from her hair. Seems to me a family affair is what started all this. She followed the direction of Xena's gaze. Then, in an accusing tone, added, We're not going to sleep any more tonight, are we? Xena let a weak grin patted Gabriel's knee. Take a moment to wash, was all she said. No one, no one found them jogging toward the barren outlands of what had once been the Theban city-state. Though the sun beat down with a harsh heat, Xena could still not shake off a chill. No matter how swiftly she ran, she couldn't leave behind the image of Oedipus's ghost. They walked for a bit to catch their breaths. Gabrielle had grown quieter too, for a change. Her blue-eyed gaze seemed constantly to be searching the land, and her face was set in a hard expression that seemed more Antigon's than her own. After a while, though, she spoke up. Xena, how did Ismene know we were coming? How did she find us in the dark? Our campfire might have given us away. Gabriel was unconvinced. Let me get some more water. That could explain how she found us, but not how she knew. Xena sped up to a trot. Gabriel's questions only filled her with a greater urgency. She didn't have answers, and she disliked not having them. In late afternoon, they reached the end of their desperate journey. Though overgrown with grass and weeds, they could still see the ruts of the road that led across the plain to where the gates of Thebes had once stood. Stone pillars, once mighty but now broken, marked the main entrance. There was no sign of Creon or Ismene, nor of any army. He saw a soft wind rustling over the plain, whistling among the ruins, made the only sound. The only movement came from white clouds, sailing a low course across the deepening sky. In sullen reverence, Xena and Gabrielle entered the city. Walls that had withstood the long siege of Polyneices and his allies lay crumbled. Flattened buildings looked as if an angry god had struck them. They moved without speaking among the rubble, climbed over shattered temple columns that blocked the streets, prowled through abandoned dwellings and homes. Gray dust from dangerous roofs showered down on them. A wall collapsed at a touch from Gabriel's staff, in the open streets, reflecting off white marble. The sun roasted them in the shadows, or in the gloomy interiors they shivered. Of the palace, nothing at all remained a wide save a wide flights of granite steps cut into a hillside. The steps led up to the summit of a narrow plateau in the city's heart, where Cadmus had built an amazing edifice as a gift to his bride and as a tribute to the god Apollo. At the at the top of the steps, upon the summit, Xena and Gabrielle turned as one and stared back. The palace offered one singular view of Parnassus. Though night had not yet fallen, a white and ghostly moon hung in the western sky. It sank slowly, inexorably toward the very pinnacle of the sacred mountain, as if to impale itself. Creon will be king, Xena whispered, when Parnassus spears the moon. She squeezed her eyes shut as she repeated the prophecy silently. Then she snapped them open again. I'll never let that bastard be king. Not of Thebes, not even of its ruins. Gabrielle touched Xena's arm. Xena? Xena turned to Gabrielle with an intense gaze. This was Creon's fault. Gabrielle, she explained. Oedipus discovered that he killed his father and married his mother, but it was all a horrible mistake, a great tragedy. The Theban people understood that. They forgave him and wanted him to continue as their king. But Creon convinced Oedipus otherwise and urged him to leave the city. With Oedipus out of the way, it was Creon who urged Eteocles to seize the throne and make war on Polynices. Eteocles was young. Creon would have wielded the real power. The sky took on a blacker color. The last rays of sunlight went through behind the edge of the world. The moon brightened. Xena, Gabriel said, pointing. We've got company. Armored soldiers filed through the street below and toward the granite steps. Leading them came an old man with gray hair arranged about his shoulders and a braided beard that hid his throat and brushed the top of his chest. At his side, sternly erect and cloaked in black, walked Ismene. Is that Creon? Gabriel asked. He's older than I expected. Xena nodded. Ambition acknowledges no age. She drew her sword and struck a pose at the top of the steps. Creon, she called. That's far enough. Squinting, the old man looked up and tilted his head questioningly. Who are you? He shouted weakly. A tremor marked his voice. An angry Ismene caught Creon's arm. Xena, she challenged. I warned you not to interfere. She waved the soldiers forward. Kill her. At Ismane's command, they steamed up the steps. Moonlight flashed on his sword blades and spear points and helmets. Hoarse battle cries filled the night. Xena met the first of them at the very edge of the steps. Her sword and booted foot drove a hair back. The others rushed on, a spear thrust at her gut. Gabriel's staff deflected it. I owe you I owe you for that one, Xena cried, skipping back. Gabrielle swung her staff and danced back too. Then you grew Margot for a month, she replied. Outnumbered, they gave ground to the charging soldiers. Xena's battle-cry soared on the wider plateau on the very foundation of the old palace. There was more room to fight. Xena's sword sang. Gabriel fought with an uncharacteristic violence. Men fell to left. Men fell to left and right of them, and the tide began to turn. Xena! Gabriel shouted suddenly as she knocked the helmet off one attacker and sent him reeling. Look at them! They're old! They were two old men and slow, though their eyes burned with determination and purpose. Age had stolen the strength from their arms, diminished their reflexes, dulled their skills. Only their numbers made them dangerous. Ismene and Creon achieved the summit behind their warriors. Creon looked only confused, but Ismene's face was twisted with rage as she led her uncle around the edges of the fighting. The wind caught the cloak she wore and it fluttered open around her neck. Gold flashed. The necklace of Harmonia. Xena gave a cry. Leaping into the air, she flipped over the heads of her attackers to land before Antigone's sister. The point of her sword flicked at Ismin's throat. "You're behind this," Xena shouted. "Who are these old men?" Ismin laughed. "All that's left of the thieves' army." Came her came her haughty answer. Men who still love Thebes and will risk their lives to see it rise again. "Will Creon as its king?" Xena said scornfully. Ismin lifted his head. "And me as its queen. Queen of Thebes, then all of Greece. Sounds like another family problem to me," Xena replied coolly, with a subtle movement. Her sword's edge severed the necklace. It slithered down Ismin's breast and fell to the ground. "You leave my niece alone, Creon." Creon, though little more than a dotard, flung himself at Xena, and they fell backward, together with his arms locked around her. Xena flung him off. From the corner of her eye, she glanced toward Parnassus, the white discs of the moon balanced on the pinnacle. Xena grinned as she often did at desperate moments. "You'll never win with this army, Ismin." Ismin emitted a serpentine hiss. "That's why I brought another." She opened her fist, revealing a collection of ivory thorns. "With Apollo's help and the teeth of a dragon, Cadmus built this city. Now with my mistress, Hecate's help and thus same teeth, I intend to rebuild it. Thebes will be great once more." "Oh, where did we hear that? Where did we hear that? Be great once more." Make America great again. With an outward fling of her arm, she scattered the teeth. They caught the moonlight, and the air filled with this sparkling and glittering. They fell to the ground, an unholy seedling on bare earth or stone foundation. It didn't matter wherever they touched. An armored soldier sprang up, but no human soldiers. From the teeth of a dragon they rose, and children of a dragon they were. Their hands were green scaled skin and clawed. Reptilian faces peered out from under their helmets. Red eyes burned with fierce bloodlust. With shields and swords they turned, not just on Xena and Gabriel, but also on the old Theban soldiers. Ismin laughed with insane glee as she scooped up the necklace of Harmonia and helped her uncle to his feet. "How sick! How can you marry your uncle and become queen?" Ugh. Xena's eyes widened in horror and disgust. She met the nearest reptilian attacker. With her first blow, she knocked away its shell. With her second, she struck the monster in the neck. The impact of the stroke shivered up her arm. It was like striking stone. She struck again, and still her blade drew no cut. Gabriel made a similar discovery. "Xena, you can't hurt them." But Xena had seen the creature stagger when she knocked away its shield. Maybe cutting it wasn't the only way to beat it. She pivoted and kicked her dragon soldier in the chest with all her strength. She stumbled back a step, and before he could recover, she kicked him again, then again. Over the side of the plateau, he tumbled to the ground, far below. She watched him strike and lay motionless. Then he got up. All around her, the old Theban soldiers screamed, though they fought fearlessly, ferociously. They fought against magic, the powerful magic of Ismene, and the witch goddess Hekate. Hekate. Though the Thebans had tried to kill her, she felt for them now and pitied their helplessness. If they were to have any chance at all, she had to disarm the dragon spawn. A warrior princess must fight for Greece when dragons' teeth are strewn. She drew her chakram and flung it against a sword blade. It flashed, then ricocheted, striking a shield and another sword blade. A broken stone column, then yet another sword blade. Xena's heart sank. The unnatural swords were stronger than her chakram. None of them had shattered. Then a thinly muscled arm shot out in a delicate hand, snatched the chakram from the air. In amazement, Xena called, "Gabriel?" Gabriel turned. It wasn't Gabriel. Antigone raised the chakram and launched it again with an uncanny precision that matched Xena's own. It flew from one sword to the next, smashing them, each just above their hilts. A warrior princess must fight. Antigone was a princess of Thebes. Again she caught the flying chakram. A dragon soldier leaped into her path. She struck out with the chakram's edge. Greenish blood spurted from a severed throat. Pushing him away, she leaped into a bit of fallen cornice and flung the chakram high into the air. Up and up it sped, spinning, catching the moonlight. It hung in the air like a second orb, gleaming, brightening down below in the streets of Thebes. Hundreds of figures began to move toward the plateau, ghostly figures, one almost transparent. Yet they glowed with the moonlight and the light of the chakram. Antigone sang, and they came. The ghosts of Theban soldiers, of Theban citizens, the ghosts of men, women, and children, the generations of a city. Up the granite steps they came, and up the sides of the plateau, climbing like insects. They seized the dragon soldiers, fell upon them, ripped them apart like bloody paper, and cast the pieces over the plateau's edges. Ismene screamed as she saw her mad dream destroyed. "No!" she cried. "Thebes must rise again, though through me. The house of Cadmus must rise and rule again." Creon caught her hand. "Daughter, daughter," he said in a feeble voice. "The gods are against us, as they have always been. Lead me home, child. God, a blind old man." Ismene lashed out. I'm not your daughter. I'm not. Under the force of her blow, Creon stumbled back, his heel caught on a bit of rubble. Even the ghosts that crowded the summit seemed to stop the carnage, catch a natural breath, turn as one, and watch as Creon fell with dreamlike grace. A long sigh seemed to escape his lips as he sank backward. A broken stone makes a harsh pillow. One by one, two by two, the Theban's ghost faded away. Ismene screamed again, a sound as unnatural as anything that had transpired this night. Picking up a Theban's sword, she ran at Xena. By all the gods! You have no right to live when Thebes is dead. You stood by, a mere witness to it all, when you might have acted to save us. Xena countered Ismene's godless attack. Frustrated, Ismene lunged again. Xena sidestepped, off balance and carried forward by her own momentum. Ismene gasped, then tumbled head over heels down the lone steps. Halfway to the bottom, broken and upside down, she stopped. You were right about this one thing, Xena murmured. You don't run from a fight anymore. She glanced toward Parnassus, which was now a black splinter deep in the moon's heart. Antigone and Gabriel's body came to Xena's side. In one hand she held the chakram, and the other the necklace of Harmonia. You will always be my friend, Xena. Xena laid her hand affectionately on the face before her and answered softly, You will always be mine. I'm sorry, Antigone, if I let you down. Antigone smiled. You did exactly what I asked of you. No more and no less. Sometimes that's the hardest thing of all. She turned away for a moment toward Parnassus, then gazed upward toward the heavens. I could keep this body, Xena. We are well matched. This Gabrielle and I could live again. Xena hesitated, then swallowed with difficulty. Not at the price of Gabrielle's soul. With that same eerie sense she had experienced before, Xena suddenly knew they were not alone. She turned. Oedipus stood behind her at the top of the steps. He held out a hand, but not in warning this time. Come, daughter, he said gently to Antigone. Guide me as you have always done. Guide us home. It was Antigone's turn to hesitate. With a sigh, she reached up and kissed Xena's cheek. Goodbye, she whispered, my friend. She walked to Oedipus and took his hand. At the edge of the steps, she turned back to Xena. It was Gabrielle. Who is that? Gabrielle asked as Xena came to her side, and they looked together, down into the ruins of Thebes. A pair of figures walked slowly toward the gates. A father and a daughter. Xena said nothing. Wow. That's the two chapters. Wow. First one fun. Second one, yeah. Whoa. If any of y'all enjoyed this, leave me a comment and I'll do this again. I'm going to go through this book. Now let's get the third chapter. The next chapter will be the longest. So it's going to be only one chapter next time. I'll say really enjoyed it. This gave me goosebumps. And exciting and fun. I've forgotten how good Xena was. You know, I once wanted to be like her and be like Buffy. So I'll just end it right there. Ciao for now, peeps. And I hope y'all enjoy the rest of the week.